Good morning, Mayor Stutsman. How are you?
I am doing really well. How are you today?
I'm good.
Good.
We'll get
Hey,
started soon. Thank you so much for joining us today.
absolutely. I appreciate the invite. I've got my IT department there. I'm swapping out cameras because the camera I had wasn't working for some reason. So I should have a camera here shortly.
Okay, no problem.
Hi, Tina. Hi, Durana. Hi, Catherine. Brianna. Wow, we've got quite a few on.
Hello. Hello, everybody.
Hey, how's it going?
Real great. How about you?
Good. Hey, Tina, thank you for moderating this. This is fantastic.
Sure. Great to do it. Good to do it. Close that door right there. What happened?
We just got a minute to go here.
Tina, I just put a message in the chat.
Okay.
So I believe it's noon. Durana, should we start?
Absolutely, we can get started.
Okay, well.
Yeah, I think everybody's here.
All right, great. My name's Dave Balkin. I'm the chancellor of the South Bend-Elkhart campus of Ivy Tech. And I want to thank everybody for joining this special session of Real Talk First Friday. Oftentimes we have these first Friday of every month to discuss diversity, equity, and belonging topics. But today we've got probably one of the most important topics that we'll ever have an opportunity to discuss, both on campus and throughout our community. And for that, what I'd like to do is introduce Durana Bird, who is our Director of Diversity, Equity, and Belonging here at Ivy Tech, and she'll kind of lead on to the introductions. So thank you, Durana.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon now. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. We're so excited to be here. We're going to have I'm going to introduce our moderator. Her name is Tina Patton, and she's been employed with Indiana Trust Wealth Management since 1989. She's currently is Vice President and Director of Information Technologies. She earned her bachelor's degree in Business Administration from Indiana University at South Bend and an MBA from the University of Notre Dame. Tina is amazing. She's a member of Kappa Beta Delta International Honor Society, and she was a 2019 inductee into the South Bend Community Hall of Fame. She's very connected to the community and currently serves as our Ivy Tech Community College South Bend-Elkhart Campus Board President. We're so excited to have Tina here joining us as our moderator today.
I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much. So does that turns it over to me, Durana?
Yes, ma'am. You can take it away.
Okay. All right. Wonderful. Wonderful. Today we have two very special guests with us. Oh, I should say three very special guests with us today. We have the mayor of Goshen. We have the mayor of South Bend, Indiana, and then we have the chief of staff of Elkhart here with us. Ms. Roberson was not able to be with us today because there was death in his family. And so we have Dayna Bennett is taking over for him today. So we're happy to have her as well. So we'll take a few moments just to let them introduce themselves and then let us know how long they've been in the office, tell us who they are, where they're from, and then we'll get right into what it is that we're talking about on today. Today we're talking about let's go to the polls. So let's let the two mayors and then Dayna talk to us about some key initiatives that are going on in their city, tell us about who they are. And so we will begin. So let's start with the mayor of South Bend, Mayor Mueller.
Sorry about that. Still learning about the mute. It always happens every meeting. So you can't have a meeting online without that happening at least once. So good afternoon. Good to see everyone. And I've been the mayor of South Bend since the beginning of the year. So both Mayor Rod and myself are newbies in the year where we had a once in a century pandemic and a historic civil rights movement as well happening within the first six months or so. So that's certainly been something that's kept us busy, staying on top of the pandemic and the economic fallout that occurred and is continuing to occur from that. But in terms of the more proactive initiatives that we're looking to take on, public safety reform was a top priority of mine coming into office. And so the broader awareness and the broader movement that's taken place over the past few months has made that job of accomplishing things that much easier, because I have to believe that there's a greater consensus now than ever that we need to take bold action to make sure that our public safety systems are equitable and provide justice for all. In addition to that, our public school system here in South Bend undertook a referendum in the spring, and now trying to figure out how to spend those dollars wisely and get our public schools moving in the right direction. So that's another major initiative that I don't have control over as mayor, but when I was running for mayor last year, I heard loud and clear that even though there's no formal authority that the city has over the schools, they want the mayor and the city to be actively involved in helping our schools succeed. And then the next pieces are really just trying to get our infrastructure. I heard a lot about roads and other things, and get our infrastructure in a better condition and make sure that they're equitable throughout all areas of town. So these basic levels of city services, need to be felt and have an equal level of service, no matter what neighborhood or zip code you live in. And so that's another priority that's keeping us busy, trying to find dollars to do that. And then the final one is just really our growth agenda, and how do we make sure that opportunities are there for all of our residents, and we can connect our residents' opportunity and tackle barriers that may exist for existing business owners to succeed.
Very good. Thank you very much for that. And so although you're new to the mayor's seat, you're certainly not new to government and not new to the initiatives that you're working on as you have been in the office before. So thank you very much for sharing those initiatives with us. So now we'll go to the mayor of Goshen, Mayor Stutsman. Let's hear about you. Introduce yourself, and let's hear about some of the initiatives that you're working on in Goshen.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I appreciate being invited to join you all today. Like Mayor Mueller, we're working hard at making sure we're staying ahead of things with our public safety and making sure that all neighborhoods have access to all services within the city of Goshen. We're a much smaller community. We're only 32,000 people, and we do have a very high Latino population. The last census has Goshen at about 32% Latino. Our Goshen school system is actually over 58% Latino this year. So we have a very large Latino population that one of the things when I came in as mayor did immediately was created what I call my Latino Advisory Committee. And it's 10 members of our community that just help to share all those bits of information and experiences that I won't be able to have, that I need to know and make sure we're working on. So it's been very successful. This is my 5th year as the mayor of Goshen, my 2nd term. And I spent 8 years, 2 terms on city council before this. So working with the community is something I never thought I'd be elected. Never thought I'd be in one of these jobs. And I started off because I was asked, and then I continue to run because I learned how much I love working with the community. We have a community relations commission here in Goshen that we've had for well over a decade. And this year I finally have been able to get the city council to agree to hire a director of the Community Relations Commission. So I'm really excited at what initiatives that will help us push forward into the future with having discussions revolving around race or any of the more important topics within a community, so that we can really start reaching out And like everybody, we're trying to figure out how do we continue to connect or reconnect with the effects of COVID-19 that we're having. So we're working at how do we start coming back together again as a community. And I think the last thing I'll mention that we're working on is I brought together a very diverse group of local artists to start developing a mural to really show the inclusivity that Goshen wants to make sure we have, show and celebrate our diversity that we have here. But try and get that mural created and hopefully installed here within the next month or two. It might go a little longer than that. And the mural location we're doing, it's actually panels that you install. So we'll be able to, the weather won't affect us getting this done. We'll be able to do all the painting inside and then take it out for the installation. So we're excited about that project as well.
Well, that's great. Well, thank you very much for sharing those initiatives. And it sounds like you're very excited and you're getting the community excited about doing some things and reaching out. And so now, again, as I said before, Mayor Roberson had a death in his family. So we do want to send our prayers and condolences to him. But he also sent Dayna Bennett, who is the chief of staff, to come in his stead. And so we'll hear from you, Dayna, in regard to what it is that's happening in the city of Elkhart.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for inviting us. I know the mayor wanted to send his regrets for not being able to be here. He was looking forward to engaging in this conversation today. As mentioned, my name is Dayna Bennett. I'm the chief of staff with Elkhart. I joined the administration in January when Mayor Roberson started. Previously, I was the chief of staff in Gary, Indiana. So I'm relatively new to the city of Elkhart, but so glad to be here. It has been an awesome experience today. From the beginning of the mayor's administration, even prior to him coming into office, him and I had a couple of opportunities to meet, and he has had a reoccurring theme around his vision for Elkhart under his administration and into the future, really. And a lot of it had to do with, could we think of Elkhart in a different way in that, so I'll back up. There is a theory around loving your city. Last year, the NLC, National League of Cities, embraced that theory, but it is around the thought that citizens who love their city behave differently as citizens. They tend to invest in their city even when there's an economic downturn. They tend to be long-lasting residents in their city. They tend to be the ones who will pick up trash outside of their house. They tend to be the ones who will service their neighbors. And the more you have citizens that love their city, the more engaged community you have. And so we started to look at how do you get citizens to love their city. And it has everything to do with their connection to the city. And we wanted to make sure that there was connection felt from all citizens, that we were not over servicing some citizens and underserving others. And whether you talk about investment in infrastructure, whether you talk about the deployment of city services, whether you talk about the availability of amenities, we have an effort underway to ensure that that equitable investment happens throughout our entire city. And the second thing that we wanted to make sure is that once we made those kinds of things available, that everybody had access to them. Everybody felt like that they could benefit, participate in those things that we were offering to all of our citizens. So there is an effort to, some cities have had it for some time, but Elkhart is new to having 311, just removing the barrier between the citizen and the city. If I need something done in my community, if I'm not connected, I don't know who to call. With 311, you don't have that barrier. You just put it in there and we'll figure out how to get it resolved for you, and you don't have to worry about it. we are enhancing our 311 so that there is a Spanish language version. So again, ensuring everybody, if the services are available, everybody has access to them. We are looking at even the deployment of our resources. Mayor Mueller talked about, are we paving streets in every area? We're looking at where streets are being paved, where sewer lines are being repaired, where potholes are being filled, where development incentives are being offered. So are we encouraging developers to develop in all communities as opposed to just a few? So that we're looking at how do we, A, improve quality of place for citizens, having them love their city more. B, how do we ensure that we're having equitable investment throughout our city? And C, how do we ensure that everyone has access to what we're providing?
Very good. Thank you so much. It seems like there are common themes among all the cities and among all of the mayors. And so we appreciate that. And as Dayna, as you were talking about removing barriers. So that was a great segue into the questions that we have to ask of all of you on today, because we're talking about getting to the polls and mostly removing the barriers that people have to getting to the polls and voting. There was a study that was done by the Sanders group, and it stated that only 55.7% of Americans actually voted in the last election. That was around 27% voted for President Trump and 27% voted for Secretary Clinton. And so we talk about this new normal that we have, and I think it's time for us to have a new normal of our democracy where we begin to vote, actually go to the polls and vote. And so as Dayna, you and Ivy Tech have come up with this real talk on today, we're talking about how do we get to the polls. And so there are barriers we know, we understand, and whatever those barriers might be, whether it is people thinking that they don't have time to vote, or because when you turn 18, you're not automatically registered, or maybe there is some felony disenfranchisement that will cause you not to vote, or maybe people think that their vote doesn't count. I think we're getting better with some of those barriers about voting. And I think as a country, we're getting better with them. But from your viewpoint, why is it important that people go to the polls and vote? So let's start with you, Mayor Stutsman. Why do you think it's important that people actually go to the polls and vote?
I think that this is one of our most basic civic duties that we can do. And it's the easiest way for us to step up and participate in what's happening in our communities. Communities thrive and survive off of people working together and coming together. And the majority of the people, I'm going to speak from my experience, what I've seen in Goshen, the majority of the people that are really involved in our community are avid voters. They want to be involved. And I think once you vote, you take a little bit more ownership of what's going on. And so one thing I do in Goshen, we talked a lot when I came in about how do we get more and more people to vote, because while the statistics were in the 50% for the nation, my last local election, less than 20% of our residents voted that could vote for our local election. So we're trying to figure out how do we get that changed. And oftentimes when you're trying to figure things out, it's starting with the youth and getting them excited about it. So when I became mayor 5 years ago, there's a state statute that allows each mayor to appoint a high school senior of their largest school district in their city to the city council. So we've done that for 5 years now. It's been fantastic. The youth that have joined us have had a lot to offer in our meetings. But the way we do that is it's my appointment, but I got with our county voting group, and they actually take the voting machines into the school, Goshen High School. The kids nominate themselves, have 2 weeks for a campaign, and then every student from freshman to senior have an opportunity to vote, and they get to use the actual voting machines they'll be using when they get out of high school and turn 18. So we see that as an education piece to try and encourage them to vote in the future too. But participation is key, and communities rely on it, and the governments rely on that to be able to really serve the way we need to serve too.
Great, thank you. Mayor Mueller, why do you think it's important for people to get out and go to the polls, in spite of the barriers, go to the polls and vote?
Well, I mean, it's not always as obvious to everyone that voting matters, that, there are choices and they're not always perfect choices, but voting is a choice, and voting is a choice about your future and our future as a community. And, that it's incumbent on those running for elected office to make the connection to how this vote will change or impact your life. But it matters, and we've seen that come time and time again. And we've talked about voter access, or you mentioned voter access, and unfortunately, due to the pandemic in our county this year, there are fewer voting centers than there have been in the past. And it's not necessarily, well, there are a couple of reasons for that. One is it's hard to get the same locations that polling locations have had in the past because of the virus concerns, but also there are a lot of the poll workers who work the polls are older than and at a higher risk for the virus. So there's fewer of our usual poll workers who want to work the polls, and so and that actually illustrates an issue of some of these workers have been working the polls for decades, and we really do need to see younger folks step up and take pride and participate, not just in the voting process, but also in the election process itself. And there are different ways we could choose to do this as a country or as a community. Election day could be a holiday. It doesn't make sense that we should be penalizing people who have work multiple jobs that are going to struggle to get to the polls. Voting by mail has become more controversial than we thought it would be, but there are states that do that, like Washington State, and their voter participation is much higher than those who do not. So a lot of different things we could do, and what there's got to be a will to make sure that voter access is a priority. But from the voters' mindset, we've got to make that case and make that compelling case that what's on the ballot matters to you, and that we really need you to step up and make your voice heard.
Dayna, what are your thoughts on that? I mean, the fact remains that, whoever it is that's being elected, whether it be a senator, state representatives, congressmen, even the president, they are selected by a small portion of people that are going to the polls and voting. So Dayna, what are your thoughts on why is it important for people to get out, go to the polls and vote?
So I think the whys range from a variety of things. For instance, in the case of the president, they choose your Supreme Court justices. So now they are not only enacting law while they're the president, but their reach could extend for 20 and 30 years because of the choices they make in the Supreme Court. And it could affect your everyday life, like how many of your roads are paved, what the situation is with student loans. It could affect every aspect of your everyday life. But I think that is the unfortunate part that we're experiencing. In the last presidential election, and even in this current one, there was a wave of young voters who felt disenfranchised, who felt they didn't feel like they even needed to vote because they felt like their vote would not matter as it relates to impacting their lives. And we have, I think, failed to make the connection between the vote and how it impacts not only your life, but the life of your children and the future as a whole. We have centered the need to vote out of some obligation that every citizen has. I mean, I think we do have an obligation, but have failed to take that further and ensure that people understand that their vote could change the way they live. And I think if we do more of that, if we make more of that connection, if we help people draw the line between their vote and what happens next year, what happens 5 years from now, what happens 10 years from now, I think people will start to get more engaged.
And I think one of the things, Mayor Mueller, that you mentioned, you started talking about issues, and Dayna, as you talked about young people, and also Mayor Stutsman, you talked about young people. One of the things I think is also important in order for us to be confident in the vote is that we need to be educated on the issues. And perhaps that may be one of the barriers also that prevents people from going to vote, because they don't really know what the issues are. They're not educated on the things that they really need to vote about. And sometimes I believe that people hold on to one issue. They just grab onto one issue and they're voting about that thing, and not recognizing that there are other things in the world, other important things in the world that other people are facing as well. I mean, there may be poverty, there may be issues of climate change, terrorism, war, drug abuse, policing policies, all kinds of issues that could occur that we need to vote on and have a perspective on. But so we get to the next question. And so the next question really is this: what are some key positions that are on the ballot locally this year? Again, why we need to go to the polls and vote. But what are some key issues or positions on the ballot locally this year? So when you're answering this question, you are now helping those who are viewing, helping the voters to know what the issues are, so that they can be educated on those issues, so they know they have to go to the polls and vote about them. We're going to start with you, Mayor Stutsman. What are some of the issues that are on the ballot this year?
So for local in Elkhart County this year, it's our county officials that are being elected, and they deal with a whole, like any level of government, they're dealing with a lot of different things that can affect our daily lives. I think one of the biggest ones right now, and Mayor Rod and I are talking a lot about this, is they're talking about consolidating our courts that we have in Elkhart County. So as of now, downtown Goshen has 3 courts, and I believe downtown Elkhart has 4 or 5 courts in their downtown. These courts do multiple things for our community. When they're spread out like they are, it allows better access to those who need it for one reason or another. They're also economic engines for each community. So as the county has decided, talking about consolidating them, they've chosen, talked about a location that is nowhere near the population center, very hard to get to for most people. And so Mayor Rod and I are really, while we're both kind of talking about different locations for our ideas, we're arguing the similar cause of, let's make sure that everybody can get to the courts. Let's make sure that it's equal access and that it's possible to continue doing what you need to do, whether you've been part of a crime, major or small. We want to make sure that they are easy to get to, so that we don't see people going back into jail because they missed a court date. But usually, a lot of times that happens because of transportation. So that's one thing that we're really looking at here in Elkhart County that I think is important, is either finding a way to keep these spread out or consolidated within our population center of Elkhart County.
Great, thank you. Dayna, I'm going to go back to you, since Mayor Stutsman mentioned Elkhart County. Is there something that you might know that is on the ballot locally that we could educate the viewers on?
So I think there's a lot of things that we should be considering as we head to the polls. Mayor Stutsman is right on the money. You have this decision being made at the county level about the location of the court building, which on the surface may seem relatively benign. But we know that, for instance, there are citizens, Elkhart, Goshen citizens, who have struggled with transportation. And now you add that barrier on top of court fees and bonds, and people who are already somewhat disenfranchised have this additional barrier of transportation just to attend to this necessary thing. And now I can be punished with jail time, with additional fines, simply because I could not get to the court. That's one thing. The economic engine that Mayor Stutsman mentioned, do you, with good conscience, as a commissioner or a county council, do you say, I want to move the court system for these benefits? Don't get me wrong, they've stated what they feel are the benefits for moving this court system, but do you do that without considering the impact of what you leave behind? there is a halo development that occurs around any county court building, law offices, court recorders, and all of them use services where they're located. They eat there. They have meeting space there. People come in town to be near that space. And so now you've had a detrimental impact to, in this case, 2 communities by relocating this building on the outskirts of one city or wherever else you locate that building. And how do you move forward with that in good conscience? And is that serving your citizens? And that's something people need to think about. But also the way that we addressed the COVID pandemic. Did we take the right steps in ensuring that people had access to information about what precautions they should take? Did we go far enough in mandating those precautions? Did we ensure that people had the access to get tests that they needed? And this election, as the election before, could mandate how we address these critical issues.
Very good. Thank you. Mayor Mueller, I'll come to you just to let us know what are some of the key issues or positions that are on the ballot locally this year from your position.
So yeah, this year, a lot of the attention goes to the national level, so the president and the Senate and the House races, but locally, and then of course the state level, the governor and the attorney general are on the ballot, which also have a lot of profound impacts. But locally, it's the county and school board races that are on the ballot here. And for St. Joseph County, there are two of the 3 commissioners. So the 3 commissioners are basically the mayor of the county. And so this year, the majority of the commissioners are up that impact how the county moves forward. And so what are some things that the county does? They certainly drive the direction of economic development, whether you were for or against the development out in New Carlisle. There's a lot of effort going into that. If you live in the unincorporated part of the county, a lot of attention has been given to the leaf pickup program. So that's something that the county commissioners manage. And the county commissioners also oversee the county health department. And this is a year where, and next year will be another big year to get vaccines out across communities whenever that's ready, not just for coronavirus, but other vaccines as well. And this pandemic this year has shown what happens when you have a long-standing disinvestment in your county health offices. And that's happened not just here locally, but across the country. And when your national and state leadership push the management of a global pandemic to the local level and your local county health officials. So there's a lot at stake in terms of how we manage and get through the current crisis. At the school board, these are the elected officials that hire the superintendent of schools and make policy decisions for schools. So the school board is what controls how our schools go forward. And there are 4 members up, 4 of the 7 members up here in South Bend schools this year. So it's, the problem is, I don't know, there's so much of the oxygen is taken up by these national conversations, and rightfully so, but there are a lot of things at stake here in these local races that don't get quite the same attention. And so even for the people who do go to the polls, a lot of people will just do straight ballot. It doesn't, for school board, they're nonpartisan, so that wouldn't apply there. But for the commissioner races, there'll be straight ballot voting for a lot of folks. And then even those who don't, what level of information are you making decisions based off of? And that's a question in every election, and that's human nature. You're not going to solve people are busy. People care about certain things more than others. We're going to have to. There's always going to be different levels of information from those who are voting, but there is a lot at stake even in the local elections.
Thank you very much to all of you. I just want to say before we go to the next question, I know we may talk a little bit about absentee voting a little bit later, but When you mentioned school board, Mayor Mueller, I just want to remind everyone that if you're going to be absentee voting, that the school boards are on the back of your ballot. And for some, they just fill out the front, they forget the back, but we don't want to forget the back of the ballot as well, because school board are on the back of the ballot, and as well, court are on the back of the ballot. So we want to make sure that we don't forget what's on the back of the ballot as well, that we complete the entire ballot when you are voting. So let's go to the next question. The next question is, how can individuals learn more about issues and candidates locally? How can we get more information? So we're listening to this webinar now, but how can we get more information? Where can we go? Is there a link? Are there links on your websites? How can individuals find out more about the issues, about the candidates, so that we can vote, have an educated vote? Mayor, I'll start with you. Mayor Mueller, I'll start with you.
Sure. I mean, one of the ways in which you can get information, and historically has been the case, is the newspaper prints different positions about the various candidates, and they usually do that a couple weeks before the election day. So if you're voting early, you may not have access to that. But the League of Women Voters, in collaboration with IUSB's the American Democracy Project, they send out a questionnaire and have their candidates respond. And I believe, I don't know the link offhand, but it's League of Women Voters and American Democracy Project at IUSB should be publishing those pretty soon. I'm sure the deadline was right around this time, and should be publishing those online pretty soon. Other than that, I mean, most candidates have websites you can visit and look to see what they're highlighting, at least what their major priorities will be. And other than that, there's oftentimes a lot, if you follow things on Facebook, there are a lot of events, meet the candidates, different forums put on that you're able to partake in. And in this era, a lot of those are done virtually online. And so, for example, there was a debate of the school board candidates in South Bend a week or so ago, and that video is still available online. And I see here in the chat that the chamber has also interviewed all of these candidates. So for the St. Joseph County races, you could go to their website and see the candidates themselves responding to some of the chamber's questions.
Very good. Dayna, in the Elkhart area, where can people go to find out more information about issues and the candidates?
Sorry about that. There are a couple of places that you can go to get candidate information. IndianaVoters.com talks about some of the candidates and their positions. Vote411.org has some information about candidates. I don't know if anybody on this Zoom meeting has heard about it, but there are two young ladies, two 20-something-year-olds who created an app called Politicking that does something similar, where they provide information and voting records for candidates, and that they are just recently launched. But there are lots of ways to get information, even through a simple Google, about what candidates' positions are and some of the issues that are before us. But I would add something just to check a variety of places, something that was mentioned earlier were newspapers, debates, and so forth. But I would add, just check a variety of places to get information. And the reason for that is there has been a substantial shift in the way we report political news in America. And it has become less biased, is what I'll say. That depending on what you watch and where you go for your news, there sometimes is spin added to news. So I would just say check a variety of places and do your research, fact check, to ensure that you are making an informed decision.
Very good, thank you. Mayor Stutsman, in your area, where can people go to find out more about the issues and candidates that are local to your area?
I think Mayor Mueller and Dayna nailed all the good places to go to already. So I think what I would add along lines of educate yourself. If you're on Facebook and you're getting information on candidates, make sure it's the candidates page. It's an event that's an official event. If you just see somebody shared a post or shared a meme or something, I would bet you 95% of the time those are false. So I encourage you. Facebook's a good place to get information, but you got to be careful about where you're pulling it off of it. And then also just really always warn everybody for my elections, if you hear something in a coffee shop that you just think, wow, he's not a good guy, call and talk to me. Locally, you can do that. It's harder to do that with the federal places, but make sure you know where that information is coming from, because oftentimes it just keeps getting relayed, and the first person that started it had ill intentions. So yeah, just education and being smart and thinking through everything before you make your decisions.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Dayna, I'm glad that you did this, and Dave and Dr. Balkin, I'm glad that we did this before the deadline for registration. So Mayor Mueller, can you give us some information on if people have not registered to vote yet, is there still time? And we'll then talk about some mail-in voting options. How can people vote if there have barriers as far as getting out? But first of all, is there still time to register to vote? Mayor Mueller?
Well, yeah, we're not much time. There are a few days left. I believe the 5th Monday is the deadline to register, and you can go to indianavoters.in.gov to register. You can go to your local BMV branch. When you get your ID, you can register automatically there. And then there are some voting drives where people are, different organizations like the League of Women Voters and others are trying to get people, make sure they're registered. And then you can also check your status if you're unclear if you've been, this is one of the things that happens. It's good government to keep track of your records, but sometimes there are some nefarious motivations for why voter rolls get purged. So if you have questions about if you haven't voted in recent elections, if you have questions whether you're still registered, you can go onto the state website as well to check your registration.
Very good. So I see that Brianna has put that link up in the chat, and hopefully someone will put that link up as well on the Facebook page so that our viewers can actually go and check their status to make sure that they are registered to vote. But we have until October 5th to register. Mayor Stutsman, can you talk to us a little bit about different voting options, the mail-in voting option?
Unfortunately, with the mail-in voting option, Indiana didn't really expand that this year. We were one of very few states that didn't. But obviously, you can do the absentee voting, which is a mail-in. I believe that has to happen 29 days before as well. But Elkhart County, I'm not sure all counties do this. We do have early voting for a couple of weeks before. You still have to go to a location, the county building. But if you can't be there on election day, it allows you to get out and do that. Allows you to avoid the lines, and that also allows you, if you're nervous about COVID-19, since there'll be fewer people, gives you maybe a safer location to vote as well. But getting out and voting, like I said earlier, is just incredibly important. I believe this is our 4th or 5th year in Elkhart County for having vote centers. Those can be good and bad. I believe for Elkhart County, it was a good move. City of Goshen used to have 22 voting locations. We only have 6 locations now with vote centers. But our community is small enough, we haven't. It hasn't made it harder for anybody to get out there and vote. But with the vote centers for Elkhart County, if you live in Goshen and work in the city of Elkhart, and you get off work at 5:30 and just don't have time to get back to Goshen to your vote center, you can actually vote in the city that you're working in as well. Any vote center in Elkhart County, when you give your information, it pulls up the correct ballot for you. So for our county, it's actually I think it's helped to make it easier for people to get to the locations and acknowledge that they work as well and may not have a lot of time to take off work. But for other areas, vote centers can do the exact opposite and limit the ability for people to get into to vote.
And Mayor Stutsman, while you're talking about voting centers, how do we know where our voting centers are? So you mentioned you have five of them now. how do the people of Goshen or Elkhart County know where those voting centers are?
So you can always call your local government. Any city, any town will tell you where those vote centers are. The Elkhart County website they keep a map of all the vote centers there. We also do a mailing in Goshen that we try to send out. I'm not sure if it's already going out or if it's going out soon, making sure that everybody in Goshen knows where the Elkhart County vote centers are and where they'll be able to vote on that day. And it's just a simple map with a star at each location. But yeah, any level of government, and then I'm sure a lot of the websites that are out there too. I've seen some of them actually. You can click down into Indiana and down into Elkhart County and find voting locations that way as well.
Very good. You also mentioned early voting, so I'll go to Dayna and then I'll come back to Mayor Mueller and asking if you can give us some information on when early voting starts. So we want people to go to the polls. We wanted to vote. We're going to give them information about how to get educated on the issues and the candidates. But we also need to let them know when they can start voting. So Mayor Mueller, when can we come to the county city building and start voting early?
That's the day after the deadline to register to vote. So on Tuesday, that's when it'll begin. They're also in the county. I believe they're still having the Mishawaka site public building also available. So that is how it goes up until you get to the polling centers on election day. And weekend times are reserved for the final couple weekends. So even though we start early voting on Tuesday, the weekend times don't come into play till closer to the election.
Okay, and Dayna, I'll ask you the same question because we need to also know when we can start voting and how do we know where to start voting. So Dayna, just the same question to you. When can we start voting and how will we know where we can go to vote?
So it's the same thing throughout the county as Mayor Mueller mentioned as it relates to the start date. And you can even go to that indianavoters.in.gov site that we mentioned before to get polling place locations. And I would encourage everyone to early vote. We talked about the option of mail-in votes and absentee votes, which again, I'm going to try to be really careful about this, but who would have thought something like the mail service, which is so quintessential American, would be disrupted and impact the way citizens vote in this election. And so I would say use an abundance of caution if you can, if there's any way that you can, and early vote so that you have an opportunity to cast your vote and speak your voice in this election. It will give you the opportunity to vote when lines are not as long. Your risk to exposure to COVID is reduced because of shorter lines, and it'll ensure that your vote is counted in this upcoming election.
Very good. Thank you very much. That takes us to our next question, because many of us saw all the pictures of the long lines at the last time that the voting took place at the primaries, the long lines of voting. We saw, perhaps some elderly people that were in the lines. But the question is this: according to an article from the American Bar Association, the quote is this: "It is far more difficult for members of minority communities to be able to locate polling places on election day. Only 5% of white surveyed respondents reported that they had trouble finding polling locations, compared to 15% of African Americans and 14% of Hispanic respondents." The question is this, and Dayna, since you were talking, I'll have this question to you. What things are being done to make sure voting centers and polling places are staffed efficiently and are accessible to all?
That's been a real challenge. Even in the state of Indiana, who went through an exercise in reducing the number of polling places, some studies have shown that those reductions happened at a larger rate in minority communities, which is unfortunate because, again, it can have the impact of reducing the amount of participation when you make those type of changes. So it is critical that we mobilize our citizens. We talked earlier about workers at the poll, and that's important. We have to have representation of workers at the poll. It needs to be diverse across ethnicity and parties for all of our polling locations. But we really need to mobilize beyond that. We need to ensure that people have rides. We need to ensure that people are informed of their locations. We need to be ensure that people have the time because of their work schedule to get to a poll. We need to mobilize beyond just having poll workers at the poll. We need to draw people to the spaces where voting can be done.
Thank you very much. I know we had talked earlier about the poll workers have been there for some of them decades. Mayor Mueller, the same question to you. What things are we doing differently to make sure that voting centers and polling places are staffed efficiently and that they're accessible to all?
Well, as we mentioned, one of the things to make sure they're staffed is they reduce the number this cycle because of staffing issues. So some of it is just a realistic understanding of how many workers that they would be able to get. And I know there's a big push to get younger poll workers in line to staff the polling locations, and that's something that we've just got to do. There's a limit even without the current issue, and we get past the public health crisis. We need to get younger people involved because none of us live forever. So that just has to happen regardless. In terms of getting the information out, this is always a challenge. Getting information, whether we're talking about a city program or people are busy, people are tough to reach, and what is the best way to get information? Mailing is one good way that we try to get. And I know the county voter registration when there are changes to polling locations, they send out a postcard. So hopefully, if you see a postcard coming from the county voter registration office, you take note and that you're getting.
Mayor, I apologize. Somebody just fell out of their chair. Is somebody there with them? It's Kirsten Taylor. Looks like she does have somebody with her there. Okay. Apologize for interrupting.
Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, no worries.
Hopefully she's okay. So yeah, that's how do you get the information out? So first, how do you have the polling locations and the workers to have accessibility? Then how do you how do you staff it? But then if you have a voter who English isn't their language, there is assistance at these centers, and or if you have a disability, you can get assistance as well. But getting the word out about especially this year, because there's such a dramatic change compared to previous years, because a lot of people just think I voted, I'm just going to go to my normal place. They may not see the postcard in the mail, they may not see the article in the news, and getting that word out that this year is different, and that here is where you can go. And then on election day, there always is a voter hotline. I don't have it on the tip of my fingers here, but there is a hotline you can call to get the information you need.
Very good. Thank you. Mayor Stutsman, Mayor Mueller mentioned that one of the ways to make sure that the polling places are staffed efficiently is to decrease the number of polling places. So you already let us know that your polling centers you have less of them. Are there other ways that you can think of that we can make sure that the voting centers and polling places are staffed efficiently and that they're accessible to everyone?
Yeah, I think Mayor Mueller had a good idea at the beginning of this when he mentioned that Election Day should be a national holiday. We do tend to have the older generation staffing our poll locations, which in normal years is great. But with COVID-19, there are people that are in the high risk category there and are stepping back now. If it were a national holiday, more people would have off work, we'd have off school, and we could actually staff those probably at a higher level than we do now. So I think that would definitely help. And then, something else we're looking at in our area is we're watching and listening to the national conversation, and there is concern, more so this year than in previous years, of voter intimidation, making it hard to get into the polling locations. So we're working with our county officials now to make sure if that happens in our community or another community, how do we respond to that? How do we make sure we catch it immediately, and make sure that everybody does have direct access to get in there and vote. One more plug for early voting, if I could. We always encourage, especially during my elections, all my family, everybody, my friends, go vote early. On election day, you don't know what the weather's going to be. You don't know what might happen at work that day, and you get held after or have to go in early, or something in your family happens. So if you get an opportunity to early vote, I always encourage people to take that opportunity. That way, it's done. You don't have to worry about that one particular day. And are you feeling okay to go vote, or you have the flu or something. So definitely early vote if you have that opportunity.
Very good. Mayor Stutsman, I'm going to stay with you right here for this last question that we have, because from the same article, there's another quote, and it says another major issue is the access to translated voting materials, which greatly decreases the minority voter turnout. In what ways do our local polling places accommodate non-English speaking voters, or voters who need special accommodations around visual impairment, for example? And do we have some way that we can accommodate non-English speaking voters at the polling places?
Yeah, and so in Goshen, what we've done for several elections now is we have a small group that has actually gotten together. The majority of the people that are going to need translation in our area, it's going to be Spanish that they need. So our county officials will allow somebody to go into the voting location with them, help them read the ballot, help translate what's being said to them if they need that. More and more too, we're able to find poll workers that are bilingual. It's not perfect yet. We want to get more that way, but so we're always trying to upgrade that. And then not as mayor of City of Goshen, but just as somebody that's involved in politics, there are several people out in the community that will call me if there's an issue, and we are able to call a local group that will immediately send somebody to that location to help that person vote and make sure that they were allowed to vote too. So we're coming together as a community to make sure we're covering those gaps and keeping it open for everyone.
Very good. Mayor Mueller, in St. Joseph County, do we also have ways that we can accommodate non-English speaking voters or voters that have special needs?
Yes, I mean, it's the same rules that apply across the state, where you can get assistance if you have a disability or your English is you're not able to read and write English. But the key factor there is technically you need to ask for assistance before you enter the voting booth. So making sure that you get that out up front when you get to the polling location. I don't know that I've heard of a case where someone was denied after the fact, but you always want to be following the letter of the law, because you never know when there may be a case where that does happen. So need to request that assistance up front.
Very good. That actually concludes the questions that we have. I'm going to allow each of you just a minute just to give a final remark to those that are listening. It could be anything: why go to the polls, why vote? Dayna, I'm going to start with you. Just a final remark in regard to voting.
There were a couple of things I just wanted to add that we did not get a chance, sorry about my phone, did not get a chance to cover.
Certainly.
When we were talking, and that is one of the mayors mentioned the possibility of voter intimidation. At every polling location, there should be polling judges there who can assist you when there is a problem around you voting or something inappropriate happening in the polling location. Someone entering the space that should not be there, someone forcing material that should not be within a certain amount of space from the poll. Also, there is something called the provisional ballot. If there is a question as to whether you can or cannot vote, you should ask for a provisional ballot, which allows you to cast your vote And at some later time, there will be a judgment made as to whether it was appropriate or not for you to vote. So I encourage people to use that option if it ever comes to question as to whether you can or cannot vote.
Very good. Thank you so much. Mayor Stutsman, any final words?
You know, through all elections I've been involved with, and then as I'm trying to encourage people to vote, I've always said this phrase. It's a little harder for me to say this year, but I always encourage people, just get out there and vote. And the phrase I always say is, I don't care who you're voting for as long as you vote. I do care a little bit more this year who you're voting for. So yeah, just encourage everybody, make sure and do that. Try and grab, 2-3 friends and take them with you, and encourage them to do the same, to convince 2-3 other people to vote. And that's how we're going to get our numbers up. And yeah, I just hope everybody here has a great weekend and enjoys your time off.
Very good. Mayor Mueller, any final words?
Well, I saw a question earlier about they're lacking a clear choice in elections, and that's driving motivation and turnout. But there are choice. Whether it's a stark choice or whether you're inspired or not, it does matter. There are actual choices, and if you can go to the grocery store and pick between different brands of paper towels, I hope that we could go and decide who we'd like to represent us and lead us at the different levels of government. And then one final plug, Monday also is the deadline for census reporting. And so, that's also an important thing to do if you haven't done already, and spread the word so that we get our fair share of representation for the next decade, as well as federal funding based off of that.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Mayor Mueller, Mayor Stutsman, and thank you, Dayna Bennett, for joining us this afternoon. I believe we've had a great discussion around the reasons why we vote, why we should all get out to the polls. It is our right to vote. It is our privilege to vote, so that we can impact the outcomes of the elections, because these elections affect our rights, they affect our personal freedoms, and they affect our taxes, they affect all aspects of our lives. And sometimes we take these things for granted. And I know that when we don't vote, we allow those decisions to be made by people who essentially, they don't know us. And so we have to use our voice to vote. So I want to thank Dayna Bird for allowing me to be the moderator on today. Thank you, Dr. Balkin, as well. And so I'm going to turn this back over to Dayna, who I believe will close us out. And then I will say to everyone, let's get to the polls and let's vote.
Thank you so much, Tina, and special thanks to all of our special guests today for your support today and coming and talking about this very important topic. I'm just echoing everybody's sentiments. We have to get out. Let's go to the polls. Let's vote. We'll be having this discussion will be on YouTube once we record it, and you can share it out and let people see it. And we're just excited to get the message out. And so anything that we might be able to do, please let us know. And I'm just excited to say thank you all for being here today. And thank you, Dr. Balkin, and the whole Ivy Tech team and staff. And I know several of you are concerned about Kirsten. We're going to check on her and find out if she's okay. So thank you all again, and have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks, Tina.
Thanks. Everybody have a good one.
Bye-bye.